Welcome to episode 85, I think it is, of Daily Dose of Dino, or as I prefer to call it, your daily shot of vitamin D3 for your mind, just to get your thinking apparatus into gear and help elevate, raise your thinking, start asking better and more effective questions, get better and more effective answers, take better and more effective actions, get better and more effective results in your business. We are talking all this week about making better decisions and therefore becoming more decisive. So why do I say that? Why is there a kind of causal effect, if you like, between making better decisions and being more decisive? Well, really simply, if you make crap decisions, if you agonize over the decisions that you have made in the past and think, eventually that starts to become part of your identity. I'm not very good at making decisions. And what do you think that does to your level of decisiveness? Well, you become a hesitant decision maker, or you just don't make a decision at all. Or you make, you still further bad or poor or ill-judged decisions. So this week we're talking about how we can tackle that. And putting a kind of a framework, if you like, around this. As I always do these in these things, let's start with a sweep of the week so far. So we started on Monday and we talked about the 4 things that get in the way, if you like, of us making better decisions. And they were what I called good versus evil, which is always going for the or and not the and. And by that I mean deciding that you're going to go, you're going for the one thing. Yeah, which automatically gives you one perspective. Yeah, so it should I go for this or this? Essentially, that's what your choice. Instead of reducing down to from a large range of things that you're going to look at, you kind of make a decision based on something very, very narrow. And the term is narrow framing, and you go down to that. So we talked about combating that by widening the frame, by reframing, which is the first of the 4R framework that we have for this. Reframing. The question, reframing the perspective and looking at it from a wider perspective. Yeah, I talked yesterday about this in some depth and talked about my decision to buy the very laptop that I'm talking to you from, and how I arrived at that by looking at, asking not questions about what laptop should I get, which is what a lot of people do, but why do I need a new laptop? Yeah, and then that started the whole discussion with myself, if you like, about mobility and it being lightweight and all that sort of stuff, and started to give me a specification that I could then reduce down. So that was, we talked about that yesterday, but that's the first of the 4 issues, if you like, the besetters. The second was confirmation bias, and we're going to get into that today. Third is emotional bias. And the fourth is bullishness, which is just like super confidence. Yeah, or a commitment, if you will, to the idea working, or the decision having to be right. Yeah, either of them is equally damaging. So the four R's of the R4 framework. Get my teeth in. Yeah, of the R4 framework are reframe, which we talked about yesterday. Today we're going to talk about reality check. Tomorrow we're going to get into removing yourself from the situation to give yourself, if you like, a mental and emotional breath, and not be so you're not the emotional bias. Remember, is one of the problems. We're not so emotionally involved with the decision, because quite often we make the decision. Well, we always make a decision emotionally, but we make the decision emotionally before we've even gone through the logic that we think is what's allowing us to make the decision. And generally, that is never the case. So we remove ourselves, if you like. We put some distance between ourselves and the decision that's probably already bubbling up inside the surface of us. And then finally, responsibility, which really means just being responsible for it potentially going wrong. Yeah, taking personal responsibility for this thing, whatever happens. And we'll look at that towards the end of the week. So let's get into this. There are a couple of. I'm going to limit this to a couple of things. Yeah. So there are a couple of things that we can. We can focus on with this. I mean, there's a lot more to the reality check. But a couple of simple ones are thinking of scenarios where you've got a friend who's an expert in, I don't know, let's just say that you're going to go into manufacturing widgets, yeah, whatever, yeah. And let's pick something that's far more relevant, probably. You want to be a coach, and you're not a coach right now, but you've decided you want to be a coach. So you go to your friend, and who's been working with coaches and is has a good grip on the coaching industry, probably been involved for 15, 20 years. And you say, I've decided I want to be a coach. And I want to take all of the skills I've got from work and turn that into coaching, because I've done a fair bit of that in the work environment. What do you think if your friends are going to say if you say, do you think it's a good idea? Do you think I should become a coach? Unless they're brutally honest with you and you're not ready for it. Yeah, you're not ready for becoming a coach. What do you think they're going to say? They're going to confirm the bias that's already in you because they're your friend. Yeah. Think of it like X Factor. Yeah. Somebody rocks up who can't sing a bloody note, caterwauls on the stage. Simon Cowell, of course, throws his eyes up to heaven. And eventually at the end of it says, who told you could sing? And the man or the woman on stage, or boy or girl or whatever, looks completely aghast and says, well, my mum, she says I'm a beautiful singer. And Simon Cowell says, well, I need to have a conversation with your mother, because that's how he is. Yeah, it's quite brutal. But the reality is, they can't sing a note. But they've had this delusion because family, friends, everybody's wanted to be pleasant and nice and say, oh, you've got a wonderful voice and you should really go for X Factor and whatever. Yeah. Like if it didn't happen, they wouldn't be on the show. We know this is around us. Yeah. Equally, we get obsession with an idea. And it is actually what we call the first of our 5 fatal mistakes, being obsessed. My creation has life, I call it. Yeah. You build the thing, therefore, nobody has an ugly baby. It's like that. Yeah. So a reality check is something you should steel yourself for and actively go and look for. It's something that if you've ever read James Kerr's Legacy about living essentially with the All Blacks, New Zealand All Blacks, arguably the most successful sporting team in the world, they have an expression called "stab me in the front," and it's very, very much about just being told brutally what the other person sees. Ask me, hold up a mirror if you like, and let me just see everything, warts and all. So having a reality check where you, instead of asking an expert who's a friend, or asking even asking an expert generally, think about this from a different perspective. Think about what you would say to a friend if the friend had asked you, and you were being brutally honest. So if a friend, it's like, I don't know, we've probably all been there, somebody is agonizing over asking somebody out on a date, for example, and you look at the person and you know that your friend is a great catch, but let's say it's a guy and he's very nervous about asking a certain girl out, and he's been kind of half stalking her for a while, just really wanted to ask her out. And it's something really simple, like you fancy going out for a coffee and having a chat. Something very, very basic. And he comes to you and says, I'm really agonizing over this. What do you think you're going to say? You're probably going to say, hell, man, go for it. What's the worst that can happen? But if you were in that situation, what do you think you'd be saying to yourself? Exactly what he's saying. Chances are, the man or the woman, whatever, the boy or the girl that you really fancied, you'd be nervous if you're nervous, you'd be as nervous as hell, and you'd be letting yourself kind of off the hook on that. So one of the questions to ask yourself about the decision that you're making is if this was a friend looking at all of this, what advice would I give them? And if it was massively risky, for example, you might be looking at it and going, like leaving a job. You might be looking at that, and naturally you'd have your own biases with this. You might be saying, hell, it's a bit too risky. Wait until you've got, if you're building a side hustle, for example, you've got 6 months worth of income, and the damn thing works before you leap. You, on the other hand, are desperate to get out of work, get away from the rotten manager that you're working with. And the environment, the toxic culture you're working with, if it's as bad as that, and you want to get out into the world. And the problem is, the first month you make $3,000 in your side hustle, you're off, and then the whole thing drops like a stone, because that's what always happens, because there's no consistency of income. So you get where I'm going with this. So that's a good reality check. Is the kind of ask as if it was of yourself. Ask as if you were advising a friend. So dig into it as if you were advising a friend, yeah? And think, what would I tell a friend in this situation? Yeah, not quite the same as removing yourself from the perspective, which we're going to get into more. Now, the second one's a bit of fun, but as I can't really as I kind of need an audience for this, I'm just gonna throw this one out as an idea, and I'm gonna leave this hanging because this is one that really has to be done with with a few people basically, and that is there was a very famous study or test performed by a psychologist called Andrew Watson many years ago, and it's a numerical test, and in it Watson assembled a bunch of people, and it was always, the test always went this way. He would run a numerical sequence to his audience. So it might be something like, I don't know, might be something like 5, 10, 15, like that, or 2, 4, 6. And it'd be delivered, the figures would be deliberately picked. And he'd say, right, give me a 3-number sequence that follows this pattern. That, don't tell me what you think the pattern is. Give me an illustration of that by giving me a 3-number sequence. And people would come up with all manner of things that would emulate the sequence, occasionally would go against the sequence. Now, the problem that came out of this test, and had we had a few people on live, I'd probably have gone through this as a bit of an experiment. Had this been done, sorry, had we done this kind of live, that's probably what I would have done. But anyway, as far as Watson's tests were concerned, here's what happened. Most people, like 99.9% of people, attempted to get the test right, which was not the purpose of it. He never said that. But the bias, the confirmation bias, was looking for this, kind of the need to be right, and the need to validate, if you like, the theory. So they stopped short, most of them stopped short of actually saying, I think the number sequence means this. So here's my theory, if you like, about what the sequence is. But here's an example. So somebody that would do 2, 4, 6, follow 2, 4, 6. Some people would do 8, 10, 12, because they thought that they were supposed to follow on from the sequence, and they thought that was what the sequence was. Other people would do 4, 9, 13, because they thought that it was the numbers before would double, would aggregate. So 9 and 4, 13. Yeah, 2, 4, 6, 5, 10, 15. And yet other people would, very, very few would play around with that. So they might say 9, 4, 13, which is wrong, by the way. Yeah, the other two are right. And that was to essentially, what's the best term? Disconfirm, let's call it that, yeah? To disconfirm the theory, yeah? To establish that the theory was, the theory was right by looking for evidence that told them that an alternative approach was wrong. Does that make sense? So instead of looking at what they thought was right, they tested things that they thought were wrong to see if they were, if you like, they were right here, because this idea which fell outside of that was wrong. So let me throw some stuff out that I think is wrong and see if it's wrong. And then I'll go back to testing whether or not my idea is right. And then I'll do it again, and then I'll test if the idea is right. So there's a sequence of numbers to see if that was wrong. Yeah, it's wrong. A different sequence of numbers to see if that was wrong. Yeah, it's wrong. Another sequence of numbers to see if my idea is right. Yeah, it's right. I'll do it again. Yeah, it's right. Those people were massively successful. Yeah, it turns out, because they were prepared to step outside of what of the confirmation bias and establish objectively whether or not their theory was correct, their idea was right, and it had some traction. Does that make sense? So remember, again, this is all about making better decisions. It's not just about the biases, but it's about how we approach arriving at a decision that we can stand by. That is, and remember, all decisions are as good as we can make them in the moment with the tools that we've got. So this is about giving you better tools and helping you use those tools to sharpen up your decisions. You will not always get it right, because that is not the nature of things, but you can still get it better. And our philosophy at Success Engineers, if you follow the talk, you'll know it's raising the floor. It's just basically just getting a little bit better every day, every week, every month, every so often, so that your worst day continuously gets better. You don't shoot for your best day. You shoot for a better worst day. Does that make sense? And raise raise your baseline. So the two ideas to leave you with on tackling cognitive bias and introducing from the 4R framework a reality check are: stand back from the decisions that decision you're about to arrive at or make. You probably already made it, and look at the kind of chain of logic and reasoning and everything else that you tell yourself that you've been going through, and the range of stuff that's in front of you, and ask yourself, if this was my best friend, what would I be saying to them? What advice would I give my best friend if they presented me with this argument, with this case, with this decision, arriving at this conclusion? Yeah. So that's the first thing. Just take yourself out, outside of it in that regard. And the second thing is, think about Watson's experiment. Think about the 2, 4, 6, 5, 10, 15. Try and think about what's going on there. Think about what you would do to deliberately try and get the answer wrong rather than trying to get it right. What is in you that is pulling you to try and give a correct answer instead of allowing you to fail in order to test your theory? Because the reality is, in the kind of the entrepreneurial lab, if you like, of life, where we because business is a theory, where we're testing stuff, this is not what people do. What most people do is want to be right. And there's nothing worse, in terms of trying to get a better decision than having that push to be right. Because the truth is, if you had two folders, one saying all the stuff that supports my idea, and then another one saying all the stuff that goes against my idea or suggests my idea is wrong, which folder do you think you're going to dip into and read first? Exactly. Yeah. So think about Watson's experiment in that regard, and start thinking about yourself and why you tend to be pulled towards wanting to give a correct answer. Yeah, and that's a rabbit hole we could really go down. Tomorrow we're going to get into the third R, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with that. We're going to be looking at how we tackle emotional bias. And the third R is remove, which is literally stepping back. A little bit of what we talked about today, stepping back from the decision. And the emotional connection you've got with the decision. We're going to look at that, how we can do that, and what the mechanics are we can bring into play to help us and support us and do a bit of the heavy lifting with that. And then as we move into Friday, I'm going to wrap up with taking responsibility for this thing potentially going wrong, and also a summary of the whole week, and give you the 4R framework to walk away with and start using. So until then, have an awesome evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are.